Let's talk about more about, I mean, just got to this one in, one out deal that so far is none out, even though we were told there were 3 flights this week. There were the illegal channel migrant arrivals who've been detained since early August would be on those flights. And we possibly, pretty likely, on Saturday, going to have one in, even if no one is put out. And the extraordinary situation where an Eritrean man, aged 25, whose mum paid £1,000 for him to be smuggled across the channel in early August. He has been allowed to stay for the meantime, after the High Court last night blocked his deportation on the basis of that he had claimed he was human trafficked, even though made no mention of that in the first few days until some lawyers had got hold of him after his arrival, but also that he would be destitute if sent back to France because he's not going to be put up in a 4-star hotel. You couldn't make it up if you tried. Let's talk to Laila Cunningham. She's a Reform UK councillor in London. She's also co-leader of Reform's Law and Order campaign. Very, very good morning to you.
Julia.
Just first, I mean, your react again, if you can keep it clean, because we're not allowed expletives on air. Can you give us your thoughts on this abject failure of what was already a laughable scheme of one in, one out?
It was already a laughable scheme. I mean, let's put it into perspective. Since the 7th of August, when the deal began, 5,400 migrants, I think, have already arrived by small boats. Not a single one has arrived. It's obviously
gone.
It's obviously one out and thousands in. Even if the flights did start, the chances of being removed are almost zero when thousands are crossing every month. Everyone knows, and migrants included, is that you're far more likely to end up in a taxpayer-funded hotel than on a flight back to France. And worse, Julia, Labour have the audacity to parade this as a win. Yeah. In reality, it's such an embarrassment that Great Britain has agreed to a scheme where France is the one who decides who comes in and who goes out. We foot the bill and nobody's ever sent back. By the way, we get no veto on who they send to us. Yeah. That's not control. That's just surrender. And let me just add, sorry, I'm so infuriated. I mean, it's not a deterrent at all. It's an advertisement. It tells every smuggler and every migrant, you know, get here, and the chances of you being sent back are virtually zero.
Well, we're told it's a pilot scheme. Apparently, the French say it's experimental. But even when we were told about the scheme one in, one out, everyone was pointing out it was 17 in and 1 out on the numbers. That was assuming they could deport 50 a week. If they can't even do a handful this week, then it's even more laughable. So a laughably poor scheme is even more, I mean, absurd right now. How damaging do you think this is for Prime Minister? Because a lot of what Keir Starmer and his former Home Secretary and current Home Secretary would say was, you know, abject failure of the Rwanda scheme, all these policies, and the Tories were incompetent, didn't know what they're doing, but, you know, they're going to smash the gangs. That hasn't happened. They've seen, was it, a 40% increase in the number of people arriving, 31,000 in the last year, but or just this calendar year so far. But that they can get on top of it by doing deals, by having good, constructive conversations with the French and doing things the right way. Already that is showing it doesn't work.
Well, it just shows how weak and frankly stupid our government is to negotiate such a deal and to have the audacity to call it a win. They're selling a scheme that will send maybe 1 to 2% back while 98% stay. And this will never end until we unshackle ourselves from the legal handcuffs of the ECHR. And as long as we're in the ECHR, the Tories didn't have the guts to do it, and that's why the Rwanda scheme failed. Lawyers will block deportations on vague claims of destitution in France or modern slavery. And Starmer knows this. But he literally wrote the manual on how to weaponize the Human Rights Act. And that's why the deal is always doomed, because we are run by a government who effectively believes in the human rights of foreign criminals and foreign illegal migrants over the human rights of British people.
And indeed, we've had that argued and in court by government representatives and indeed by judgments being made by courts. But here's the thing. What would you do differently? Because getting out the ECHR, yeah, I think that's a no-brainer now, and the Refugee Convention. However, you can do all of that, but all of this stuff is already enshrined into the Human Rights Act here in the UK. You want to try and change that? Well, that's going to take a while. You're going to get some fighting, even if it's in the manifesto, if you got elected, fighting from the House of Lords. But you've also got hundreds and hundreds, possibly thousands of activists, judges and lawyers who will use every little rinky-dink, little chink in, of they can find in the armour to make sure that people stay.
Yeah, that's why this one in, one out deal is effectively a lawyer's charter. But Julia, the Human Rights Act was never meant to enforce the ECHR. Actually, ECHR was around, I think, about 40 years before that, and we didn't have the Human Rights Act. Tony Blair passed it as a way to get closer to the EU. So the fact that we need the Human Rights Act to enforce human rights in our country is laughable. We taught the world about human rights.
Very true.
just because we don't accept illegal migrants, who some have gone on to rape our young girls, how do we know they're not terror cells from Afghanistan, Julia? We have no idea who these men are. And just because we're not willing to accept them, that doesn't make us some kind of despotic regime like Belarus. I was called hard right on GB News for advocating for this. Yeah. That is how deluded the political and journalistic class is about what British people want. And frankly, that's why Reform's doing so well.
And you certainly are doing well in the polls. There's no doubt at all about that. And of course, now your leader, Nigel Farage, big pals with Donald Trump. He was over in the States recently and had a lunch with him. What do you hope that Donald Trump will be telling our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer? I mean, he's being all obsequious. He's rolling out the red carpet. He's doing the stuff you've got to do, even though you know he's clearly not a big fan of Donald Trump's politics. But what do you hope that Donald Trump could say to our Prime Minister about these issues?
That any politician like Sadiq Khan, who is saying that we should not have Donald Trump in our country, is betraying our national interests. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. Listen, I wanted Trump to win over Harris. If Harris had won and I was in government, I would open welcome to her, because we are dealing with the biggest, not only commercial partner, but defense partner, every partner that we have, and we must welcome them with open arms. And any politician who says that is not representing Britain and is not representing our best interests. What I do hope Trump says to Starmer is that freedom of speech is not something that you take away at will. It is not up to the government to decide what the people see or read, and it's not up to a Secretary of State to decide what's misinformation or disinformation. Number one. And number two, I want him to speak to Starmer and say we need to be an AI superpower, and we can partner with the US for that. But we cannot be an AI superpower with the net zero madness that Ed Miliband is inflicting on us.
There's a £30 billion deal with some US tech giants that includes AI. But again, that involves huge amounts of energy, which is 4 times more expensive here than the UK, than the US. A lot of people are saying, what has been given in return for that deal?
Well, I think, I tell you what's been, so copyright is a huge issue for AI, because they need to be able to access information that's protected by copyright. And we have a huge wealth of copyright data, for instance, from the NHS, our universities. We have a lot of writers, all this. And I think there will be a deal with that. And the only way to compete with China is to really re-examine those copyrights, because they don't have that, and they're going to beat us on the AI race. We cannot let China as well be an AI superpower if we're bogged down with regulation. We have to realize that it is an AI race right now, and we're not winning it, and we don't want China to win it, and we want to be partners with America. But we need efficient and affordable energy supply, our own energy supply, and Labour's doing everything to stop that.
What do you make of, just finally, the 4 people have been arrested after images of Jeffrey Epstein with Donald Trump and with Prince Andrew projected onto Windsor Castle? The issue of Jeffrey Epstein and his relationship with so many powerful men has been big news over the last week, but it actually touches on all of the men, the key figures involved this week. The King, his brother Prince Andrew, clearly a close friend with Epstein, even after convicted of his child prostitution case back in 2009. Lord Mandelson, appointed as ambassador to the US by Keir Starmer and given full confidence, even when it was known that he again stayed really close friends with Jeffrey Epstein after that. And of course, Donald Trump, who admittedly is probably the man who broke up his friendship with Epstein rather earlier. What do you make of that man's image, that man's name and that man's crimes being associated with this trip?
Well, the only thing that concerns me is that we have a prime minister and a Labour Party who accused Farage of being on the side of Jimmy Savile for trying to protect freedom of speech, yet they actively promoted and sent someone who's best friends with one of the most prolific paedophiles in my history to represent us in the USA. Starmer glossed over it. Does that mean he approves of Epstein? Does that mean that Epstein, he wasn't just an associate of Epstein, he was his best friend. He was Petey. He was bathrobe Petey to Epstein. He said he loved him even after he was convicted of paedophilia. And I just don't buy it that Starmer didn't know. And if he ignored not to know, just so he could stand up in Parliament and not lie in quotation marks, then that is also a dereliction of duty.
Yeah.
He's the Prime Minister. He must know everything. I didn't know simply doesn't cut it for a Prime Minister.
No, indeed. Laila Cunningham from Reform UK, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Keir Starmer, do you want to come back on any of that?
Yeah, no, I agree with the points on Peter Mandelson and what Keir Starmer knew, and it doesn't fly at all, and you can't accuse other people of doing something when you've basically just done it yourself.
Yeah, again, if you're still going to point someone, you think it's not really a problem than being mates with somebody who pleaded guilty to basically soliciting 14-year-olds. You can't 14-year-olds can't be prostitutes.
No,
they're victims
they're
victims of child abuse. Yeah. It's really that simple. 14-year-olds are kids. Not a problem for Keir Starmer, apparently. He wasn't that bothered about it because, having a teenage daughter himself, apparently not an issue. I've got some serious questions about this. Yeah.